Hey everyone, welcome. This webinar is Crash Course to Homeschooling, and you are going to learn all about the basics of getting your homeschool up and running with confidence. So today we're going to be reviewing your purpose, the policies that you need to know before you get started, and developing a plan. So the 3 Ps of homeschooling. Welcome, and my name is Kristen Perez. I am a lifelong educator, been in the field of education for about 20 years or so, mostly in the private arena. And in July of 2020, we made a nationwide move from California to Georgia, and I enrolled my teenagers into public school, which was virtual at the time. And unfortunately, it was not working out very well for us. It was not to do with the school. It was the way we were learning and adapting to that new environment, to the new state, et cetera. And we opted for our best interest to move into the homeschooling environment. And I have to say that even with 20 years of experience under my belt, I felt so overwhelmed. These were high schoolers. We needed to make sure their transcripts were in order. Were they going to get into university? Were we going to get all the credits we needed? Was this even legal? All of those things were so overwhelming. And now that we're settled in, we're on our way and doing well, I started taking it upon myself to help new mamas just like yourself get started with confidence, knowing that you are doing the right thing for your kids. So let's go ahead and get started. I do have a PowerPoint for you just to help me keep on track because I tend to talk too much. So let's go ahead and get started, mamas and papas, who's ever here joining us, of course. All right, let's watch our little PowerPoint. I do have a bit of an icebreaker for you. Now, a lot of you have been in public education for a very long time, and I need us to take a moment, take a step back, and kind of tear up everything we know about what education looks like in the formal arena. Let loose, take a break, because you're homeschooling now. There go the rules. She's too cute, right? All right, that's going to be you soon. Do not worry. And I also want you to remember that little giggle, that little laugh, because that is at the center of what we're doing here, folks. We are reclaiming our kids and bringing back the joy of learning. Right? Who's with me? Good. All right, let's keep going. So this is, like I said, a crash course to homeschooling. This is going to get you to the point where you know just enough to sort of start researching all of the things you may need to get in hand before you can kind of open the doors and start learning. So let's start with your purpose. Your purpose, what is it? Well, that is your reason, your motivation, or your why for starting into homeschooling. Why would you as a parent decide to take your children out of a situation where they are being not only watched and cared for and educated, but they're also being fed, they're cleaning the toilets up after them for 6 hours a day? Why would you take your kids out of a situation like that and bring them into your house where now you are not only the principal, but you are the teacher, the lunch lady, and the janitor all day long? What would provoke you to want that for yourself? Well, I can tell you there's probably 1,001 reasons why. Right? And they're all right, as long as the child's best interest is in your heart. And I'm going to guess, because you're watching this, that is absolutely your purpose right now, is the best interest of your child. So let your purpose and your passion then drive your plan. One of the biggest challenges for parents is to make that mindset shift from that traditional educational planning or programming model to an intentionally passionate or purpose-driven homeschooling experience, one in which not only caters and supports the needs of your individual child, but aligns to your philosophy, your schedules, and just your kids' needs, right? So what's your why? Well, in a perfect world, we would have all wanted to homeschool our entire lives, and this is just a dream we've already had. And for some of you, coming in and watching this, this is exactly where you are. You have kindergartners, first graders, and it's sort of always been a dream of yours, and you're going to start this lovely journey. For other of us, we're on the next slide over, which we'll get to in a minute. So there could be a lot of whys. There's personal whys, personal purposes. Maybe it's your beliefs or your faith. You want to integrate that more into the daily education of your child. It could be family development, well-being of the child. Maybe your child is going through a state of mental health crisis, anxiety, depression, something like that. I'm talking to you probably 12, 13, 14-year-olds, right? Maybe 11 even at this point in time. The public system is proving to be exceedingly stressful for some kids. Okay, not all the kids, but some kids. And if that's yours, you know what I'm talking about. Opportunity, maybe for personal opportunities, interests, hobbies, athletics. Maybe they want to work and study at the same time. And of course, these ever-present health issues and mandates. Academics, there could be educational philosophy. Maybe the school is all worksheets and you want to be all hands-on and play, or maybe it's the vice versa. Curricular freedoms, personalized experience for your child, control of academic pacing and rigor. That's a big one. Maybe your child needs to go a little faster than what the public system can allow. Maybe they need to retain it a little, well, they need to retain it, period. And the pacing is too fast in that environment, right? So you get to choose that pacing for yourself. Maybe your child has special needs, or there's educational opportunity. And I'm going to start off with by saying our little story here is that my older one, we chose homeschooling for both of them, actually for very different purposes. But for my older student, he did not get the courses he wanted in that public school. We were only there for 6 weeks after withdrawing. He did 9th and 10th in public and did just fine, but virtual did not work for him. And so he wasn't doing too well in 2 of his classes, which was a problem given his idea to go to university. That was one of his purposes, his goals, right? So that wasn't going to go bode well in the 11th grade year, and he didn't get the classes that he wanted. So when we withdrew, educational opportunity was at the forefront. So he was able to take 3 AP courses and pass all 3 exams through the local school, which, by the way, if you're doing APs, you have to do it through a local school, which was going to award him then 9 college credits. And this year, he opted to go to dual enrollment for free, courtesy of our state, and will graduate with 1 credit short of a year's worth of university. So talk about a transition from a situation that wasn't working for him to one that has advanced his educational platform, right? Quite a substantial difference, and just sort of a validation that it was the right decision for us. Let's talk about crisis intervention homeschooling. Now this, you'll know it if you are one of those, right? Midst of 2020, you were told to school at home. You did that thinking it might have been the worst thing ever, and lo and behold, your child loved it. Right? Surprise! They didn't like going to school with 100 or 200 or 1,000 kids all around them and 30 kids in every class, right? So you sent them back to school thinking they were going to be oh so happy to see their friends again, and womp womp, they did not. Now they're facing stressors in school. They're unhappy. Maybe they've got anxiety. If this could be a decision right now that you're facing, it's unplanned. Maybe it needs to be immediate. This could be temporary. It could be permanent. I don't know, right? This was caused by an event, a trauma, a circumstance, maybe an unmet need, or your child's failure to thrive in the situation they are in, right? Like mine, we were in a situation where we were failing to thrive, and we could be thriving in a different arena. So your purpose is to breathe, right? Let's talk about that. Think about that carefully. If you're in a crisis intervention mode, the purpose you want to focus on right now is just breathing, healing, and reclaiming your child. Take them back, understand their style of learning, understand their needs, and then the academics can fall into place. You can take a hot minute though to settle in, all right? And then find something to serve them educationally, the path of least resistance right now. And then after your recovery, establish some routines, redefine your purpose, and then reignite the educational spark, that love of learning. All right, let's talk about policies now. I'm going to get out of the PowerPoint, and we are going to start talking about understanding and complying with state laws. as homeschoolers, it is our duty to comply with the laws of our state. You will go onto Facebook and you'll hear 5,000 different answers on what needs to happen for you. But the bottom line is it is really, really state dependent, and you need to know those state laws. And when we comply with those laws as homeschoolers, we will retain more rights than if we start bucking the system, right? So let's go ahead and go on to the HSLDA website. If you haven't been there, that is your quick lookup, fast resource. They even offer legal help. You can become a member with them for a fairly low amount of money. They offer scholarships, but they can help you on your journey if you feel like you need some legal assistance. But let's go ahead and jump over to that site. And I'm going to talk about the state laws. Now, keep in mind, this is educational purposes only. Legal advice, it is not, okay? So you do need to do your own research on that. Little disclaimer, of course, for you there. So let's find out complying with state laws. So I'm going to back out of here for a second. So let's look at this little map on this website. There are states that are no or low regulation. The lighter blue is low regulation, moderate regulation, a little tighter, and of course, those red northern states of high regulation. You guys really need to know your laws carefully, okay? You're gonna have to do and produce a lot more to substantiate your homeschool than, say, a no regulation state. So let's look at Indiana here and just talk about the definition itself of what homeschooling is in your state. And it is very state dependent. Remember that, okay? So they define what homeschooling means. So in Indiana, you have one option for homeschooling, and this is probably one of the least restrictive states. Their option for homeschooling is Indiana homeschools are considered to be non-accredited private schools, and thus homeschools must comply with the private law or the private school statutes. That's the rule in Indiana. And then they kind of go on to explain what that means. And apparently their statutes are as such. They have to provide instruction in English. They have a certain number of days that they need to provide instruction. And here it's 180 days. They need to maintain records of attendance. If somebody comes looking, you have to have those ready. Will somebody come looking? I don't know. It depends on your state. If a nosy neighbor calls you in, they might. If you end up in a divorce dispute, you might, right? So always have those records available. And then providing information if the state requires. So be prepared, right? Always better to be prepared than sorry. In Indiana, let's talk about school required for ages. So when you're talking about ages of school, basically in Indiana, it looks to me here like kindergarten is probably not required, but by the age of 7, if you haven't enrolled in a school, you need to tell the state that you are keeping your child home, or that's when you need to start homeschooling. All right. Do they need to notify anybody? Actually, no, they don't. Okay. They can just start homeschooling their children, but most states at least require some sort of notification. And that could be in the form of a document filed online. Like in Georgia, you go do your notice of intent, just online, takes about 2 seconds and you're done. You do that every year. In other states like Pennsylvania, it needs to be a notarized affidavit listing out your course of curriculum, the ages, where you're going to be teaching, who's the teacher, etc. So again, you need to know those rules, and the HSLDA can kind of help you do that, or you can go to your state department website of education and try and figure that out from there. Teacher qualifications, that's going to mean, do you need a GED? Do you need a high school diploma? Do you need a degree or a teaching credential to teach your children at home? Most states are fairly relaxed on this, but you do need to know if you qualify, right? State mandated subjects, are there any in Indiana? No. Does that mean you shouldn't teach certain subjects? Probably not, right? Again, purpose. What's your child's purpose? What is your purpose for your child? And most of us want the best for our child, and we want to give them the educational opportunities that they deserve. So if your state does not have mandated subjects, my recommendation would be go to maybe your local county school's website, the district, and see what is required of those students for graduation, and at least comply with those subjects. What you teach within those subjects, that's really up to you, but at least get it on their transcript that they did those subjects. Or if your child is college bound, you need to go to maybe their favored university website and see the admissions requirements. Many universities want to see 2 languages of the same language, right? So maybe 2 Frenches or 2 years of German, whatever it is. If your child doesn't have that and you didn't provide that to them, then they may be at a disadvantage when they go to apply to the university they want to. And we never want them to be at a disadvantage, right? Because again, you are the teacher, the counselor, and the principal. So make sure you know those things and align them to the child's goals and purpose. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there, but other states will have a litany of things that actually you do need to be teaching, right? So they'll almost self-prepare those kids for those opportunities. Assessment requirements. Do you need an annual or regularly scheduled state assessment or national assessment, like a CAT test or Iowa Basics, SAT 10, something like that? In Indiana, no, you do not. Would you want to take one? That's really up to you. Maybe you want to see where your child is performing in the grand scheme of sort of the national norms. Those tests can be really good to help guide your instruction for your child, not necessarily the child's performance, but how well are you preparing your child, right? And is there anything you may want to work on to rise them up? Or is there anywhere there's just excelling where you could actually advance them further? So it's a really good tool for you as an instructor. Let's talk about that's the assessments, and then immunization requirements. Do you need immunizations for your children? Well, in Indiana, no. In other states, you do either need to have those immunizations available in your files or maybe an exemption request. All right. So that is basically a very low no regulation state. Let's look over here at Pennsylvania very quickly. I'm not going to go through all of it, but in Pennsylvania, they have 4 options for homeschooling. They have a few choices. They need to be in school from 6 to 18. That means if they're 6 by September 1st, have you submitted your notice of intent, right? And then they need to be in school until the age of 18. And then most states will have some sort of guidance on, well, if they haven't graduated by 18, then I guess they can leave, maybe go get a GED, or there's an early graduation expectation that they could also do if they'd like. Some states say at 16, you can graduate. So if they've done all of the required subjects, they could actually graduate early if that is a desire and part of your purpose and your plan, right? Teacher qualifications, no, except in 1. They do have state mandated subjects. They do not require an assessment except in option 1, which you would need to go and look into. So if we click on theirs, in Pennsylvania, there is a homeschool statute under which people can homeschool. They could also use a private tutor. They could be part of a satellite or religious day school, or they could be a satellite of an accredited day or boarding school. So every state, again, is going to have laws that vary in one way or another that will define you as either a homeschool student or a student who is schooling at home. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes here. But example, state of Montana, I believe, maybe don't quote me on this, but anybody who's not enrolled in a public school is a homeschooling student, even if you're enrolled in a private school. Let's think about that one for a second. I believe California is very similar to that. So what does that mean? Well, goodness gracious, it means even if you choose an online private school that maybe isn't out of your state or complying with state private school laws, for instance, California, right? You choose something like Accella's Academy. Well, Accella's Academy is accredited, and they will give you a diploma and transcripts, but according to the state, you are not a private school student. You are a homeschooling student. You still need to comply with those laws. But in the end, you'll still end up with a diploma that you could use for university purposes, maybe military purposes, trade school purposes. So you kind of end up with this dual system there. All right. All right, let's go in and we're going to back out of here, go back to our slideshow. All right, so hopefully we now understand the need for searching up your state laws and not listening to all the people on Facebook because they are speaking from their own perspective. So let's break this down one step at a time. What does the state control? Well, it just controls all those things we just talked about, including the definition of who is a homeschooler, okay? Now, what do you control? Well, you control the structure of your homeschool. You control the educational approach or style that you want to implement in your school. You control the curriculum selection and the instructional delivery. How do you want to teach your children? Are you more play-based? Are you more worksheets or textbooks? That's up to you. And we'll talk a little bit more about those options in a few minutes. You control the classroom climate. Do you want it relaxed, everybody hanging out on the rug or the couch? Or do you want a very structured little school where everybody's at a little desk or maybe the kitchen counter, or the kitchen table, right? That's up to you. Pacing, workload, and rigor, you get to control that as well. How fast would you like the pacing to go? And it's generally determined by the needs of the child. You can go faster or you can go slower. Just keep your child's abilities in mind, right? You control what is counted as school hours, and this is a big one. So let's say you choose an online program like Power Homeschool or Study.com, and your state requires 4.5 hours of learning per day. Does that mean that your child has to be on that program for 4.5 hours a day? No, goodness gracious, they absolutely do not. The online program that you've chosen isn't their school, that is their curriculum. So I want you to think now to when your child goes off to school, they use a variety of resources. That teacher might give them a worksheet on one day, they might watch a video, they do a field trip, they go outside and explore for nature one day. All of that is considered curriculum, just as much as your online program is considered curriculum. So you could do an hour or two of online work, and that is just a piece of your learning puzzle. That's the good news, right? The rest of it can be kind of exploratory or hands-on or self-defined. So if you do language arts on that online program, what else would count for learning that day? Well, anytime they spend reading, anytime they spend writing stories, maybe they're older and they like these TTRPGs, these online gaming, like Dungeons and Dragons or something, that is storytelling that could actually count towards your English credit, right? So it's really up to you. Maybe going outside would be considered science, or it could be considered PE, going for a walk, playing sports, doing music, drawing at the table. All those things are learning. Even computer gaming could be considered some part of their STEM credits or their STEM work, okay? You define that. You also control the grading scale and how you are going to grade your students. So are you a big fan of the red pen? Are you not a big fan of the red pen? Again, it's up to you. What is the purpose of your learning? Is the purpose for them to know they got 7 out of 10 right? Or is the purpose for them to learn to mastery, to say, hey, you know what? You already got these 7 right. Let's learn the other 3. Ding, ding, to make sure that we understand what we are learning for the sake of learning. That is up to you how you grade. You may want to grade on a pass-fail scale. You may want to not grade at all. That's up to you, with the exception, of course, of high school, because in high school, you do need grades for those transcripts or at least a GPA, all right? Discipline, you're in charge of that. You're in charge of any resources for your child. Some states, some districts will offer special resources to special needs or students with special needs. Others will not. So it's up to you to find those resources. It's also up to you to find enrichment resources or anything else you want to provide to your child for the sake of learning. And very importantly, you are in charge of second breakfast. It's a homeschooling thing.
Gentlemen, we do not stop till nightfall.
What about breakfast?
We've already had it.
We've had one, yes. What about second breakfast? Thinking knows about second breakfast bit. What about the Lindsay's? Lunches, afternoon tea, dinner, supper.
Dinner?
He knows about them, doesn't he?
Anyways, I feel like I have done my job now. You officially know about second breakfast. So let's continue on. All right, so now you know about the policies, you've understood your purpose. Let's move into the plan. Simple steps to getting started, your structure, your approach, your curriculum, and your calendar. All right, things to consider when you're sort of assessing and defining your plan. What is the age of your students? This will look and be extremely important in many of your decisions right now. If you have young students, 5, 6, 7 years old, you have a long time to teach them, to educate them, to adapt resources, to understand their learning styles, right? When you're homeschooling in elementary school, it is pretty much understood nationwide that you can finish, say, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and then if you want to re-enter an elementary school, you pretty much just start at grade level, whatever age they can just roll into that school. If you're in high school, that is a completely different beast. All right. In high school, you kind of want to go in with the mentality that once a homeschooler in high school, always a homeschooler in high school. And why do I say that? Well, schools are not required to take your homeschooling credits. Let's say that again. Schools are not required to take your homeschooling credits. So if you are in 9th or 10th grade and you withdraw for 11th and then you go back into 12th, they may not accept any of your 11th grade homeschool credits. So it is extremely important that you talk to the district, you talk to the school and say, hey, I want to homeschool. This is the platform I'm going to be using. Will you take their credits if we come back for senior year? And they may say yes, they may say no. Whatever you do, get it in writing, always get it in writing, right? It might be as simple as, sure, you can come back, you just have to take those end of course exams, or it may be a hard no. So know what you're getting into. If it's a hard no, ask them if they have an accredited transcript, if they do schooling at home versus homeschooling through, say, an accredited school, could they transfer it back then? We've moved a couple of times and I've never had any problem transferring our public school credits or the private school summer credits that we did through, say, BYU. We didn't have trouble transferring them back in. In fact, the schools welcomed having those kind of summer classes on their transcripts. In fact, in California, they kind of made them do it. So something you really, really need to consider. I know with my guys, we basically said, look, once we're out of the public system, we're staying out of the public system. But one thing we did do was work under an umbrella, which is accredited in our state. And I'll talk about that a little bit and why we chose to do that with our family. So students' needs, special needs of your students, you want to consider that. Learning styles, are you going to be structured or unstructured? Are you more of a textbook kind of family, or are you more of an unschooling kind of family? Are you going to be secular or more faith-based? And is the curriculum you choose, do you want that to align to that? So if you're a faith-based family, do you want a curriculum that is absolutely sort of grounded in that faith, or are you okay with a secular curriculum and overlaying the Christian worldview? Something to choose. You need to determine your calendar and your schedule. Are you going to be a year-round student or homeschooling family? Are you going to maybe take that traditional school calendar, summers off, etc.? Temporary or permanent, what's the situation here? And of course, what is the most effective method of instruction for your child? That is very important. That should be your core purpose, which will define your plan, right? So selecting a structure, remember, let your purpose drive your plan. Structuring your homeschool should be the first decision because that's going to help you narrow down your choices. It's going to seem a lot less overwhelming when you can narrow it down at least to one structure. Like, will you be schooling at home or will you be homeschooling? And then you can break it down from there. Are you returning to public school? Are you in crisis mode? Is this permanent, etc.? So let's talk about the difference. When you are schooling at home, here in that second column, you are enrolled in a school, which means it could be accredited. It may not be. Not all schools are accredited. That would be up to you if you value that. And we will talk about accreditation in a second here. But the school determines the approach, the methods, the curriculum, and the schedule to which you can learn. Some are a little bit more flexible than others. Examples would be public virtual school, K-12, charters, private virtual schools with live instruction, maybe synchronous learning. It may be assisted, but it's generally run by a teacher of some sort. Maybe it's a private online school, which is self-paced. Good example is Celis Academy. They watch a video, they answer questions, they do the test, they move on. When they're done with the class, they move into the next class up, and virtually no teacher-directed instruction whatsoever. Just a word of caution, choosing those public options. If your child is withdrawing because they struggle to keep up with a rigorous pace, that may not be the option you want to choose, because that pacing is still the same as the private school. It's just going to be done at home. I was talking to one mom recently. Her child is an online private kindergarten, and they were spending all day online, and then they had hours of homework after that. Ow. Right? So you need to know what your child is up against when you enroll in these types of schools. And then, of course, there's an umbrella option, and that's going to vary drastically by state. In Georgia, our umbrella basically just looks at the syllabus and the courses of learning that we are doing, and they just verify that I am doing what I said I was going to do. And then they validate it, they write it on our transcript, and we get an accredited transcript with a diploma in the end, as long as we meet all the graduation requirements for the state. Others will do a little bit more thorough of maybe a portfolio review, right? In this case, the school issues your transcript, your report cards, and your diploma. Very important. They will give you those things, okay? If you're a homeschooling student, let's talk about that. You are the school. You are kind of a private school within your state. You're the principal. Again, you're the teacher. You're in charge. You do have to file the notice of intent, and you need to follow those state laws, but other than that, you are responsible for the approach, the methods, the curriculums, and the schedules that you are going to use in your homeschool environment. And you create the report cards, the transcripts, and the diploma in the end. Sit on that for a second, especially if you have a high schooler. If you are in a homeschool, you are creating their report cards, their transcripts, and the diploma. Now, a homeschooling diploma is a legal document. Colleges do accept homeschooling diplomas and transcripts. Transcript is basically a running record of all the classes they did in high school, and that is what is going to be sent to, say, universities, the military, trade schools, as proof of their learning record. But you have to create that. And it's not as hard as it sounds. It just means taking good records. And then maybe you just want to purchase a transcript online. Teachers pay teachers, Etsy, there's a few formal companies out there who just provide transcripts and diplomas with your information. They stamp it, they seal it, it's beautiful. And that's just a nice document for you to have if you don't want to write your own. Accreditation, what is it and what do we need it? And do you need it? Well, the answer, as is quite often, it really depends. So you can go onto Facebook groups. You're going to say, I want an accredited school. And half the people are going to say, well, that's bullcocky. You really don't need it. And others are going to say, yeah, we really like it too. So which one's right? Well, it depends on your situation. What is accreditation? Well, basically it's third-party validation, stating it's an entity basically that comes into the school and just validates that the school is doing what they set out that they said that they were going to do, right? They're going to validate the teacher qualifications, fiscal responsibility, coursework, etc. And I know there's some people who will devalue it a little bit, but as a school administrator or former administrator who's gone through the process, it is a really heavy process, and it really does give the school some time to reflect and to really improve their standards for learning. So there definitely is some weight to an accredited school, but do you need it? Again, it depends. So Accreditation may be national or regional. There's a lot of different agencies out there, but about core 6 that should be kind of looked at as your key ones if you are looking for that option. Some are recognized by the DOE and some are not. So you kind of want to go to that recognized group. Only schools can be accredited. So you pick a homeschooling program at home, it's probably not a accredited institution. No curriculum could be accredited. It has to be monitored by these agencies. So only schools can be accredited. That could be public schools, private schools, again, like Excelis Academy, they are accredited. BYU would be accredited, et cetera, et cetera. And then that seal of accreditation will go on the transcripts that you earn. Now, do you need it? Well, there's a few benefits to it for sure, and it may be of value to you in certain situations. For instance, if you're looking for high school credit transfers, you're withdrawing for 11th, you want to go back to 12th, it would be wise, A, to check with your school district, and then B, to get and earn credits from an accredited institution. Some of these bigger online institutions can do that for you just to make sure that the standard of learning will be equal to what the school wants of you when they return. NCAA sports scholarships, they may require it. If you're relocating, you know you're going to be going to a different schools district, that might be helpful for you. Admissions to out of country universities. My son is looking to maybe go to university in Germany. Homeschooling is illegal in Germany. Okay, so a homeschool transcript will probably not be looked upon favorably. So an accredited transcript from him was very important to us. Out of country universities, for instance, Canada, some of their universities say you must have an accredited transcript if coming from the US. So a few reasons there. Scholarship access in the state of Georgia, I don't have to jump through any extra hoops if my child has an accredited transcript. If I'm a homeschooling student, that scholarship may be only available to me retroactively. So know your options and your resources for your state. In Virginia, if you are in a private school, you do not have to do that annual standardized testing. And if that is important to you, an accredited transcript might be of value, right? And then of course, there's just the factor of personal comfort and peace of mind, right? Maybe it's your family saying, well, I don't know what they're going to be learning in that homeschool of yours. You can say, no, it's an accredited school, right? And then that's all you need to say. But do you need it? Probably not, right? So it's really up to you. Figure out what you need based on your purpose and your plan. Let's talk about the two approaches here. There is an approach that you could school at home. So when 2020 hit and we were all told to go home from school that day, oh my, and we had to bring our children home, and they were all virtual online, that was schooling at home. Another institution was still monitoring the education and assessment of our kids. So you have some accredited options, public or private. Under public, you could go to charters, county virtuals, state virtuals, K-12. Again, they are all going to set the pace, the curriculum, and the assessments for your kids. There's also private options. There's some synchronous options, meaning you need to enroll and show up at a certain time, a certain day, and the teacher's going to be teaching sort of face-to-face there. There's asynchronous, where the platform is delivered to you, but you probably still need to follow their set schedule for deadlines and say homework submissions, but they may not see that person or that teacher face-to-face. There's some self-paced programs like Excelis Academy. I believe Enlightium might be like that as well. Don't quote me on that. But basically the children can go completely at their own pace. There are no deadlines and it is a rolling admissions, or there's umbrella options available in some states. Moving on to the homeschool side. So again, that is school at home. You're not technically a homeschooler necessarily, especially in the public options. Private, you may still be determined as a homeschooler, but you'll end up with a private school accredited diploma, right? Whew, I know, so confusing. So then there's the homeschooling options. And this is where you're going to want to delve into your purpose and your plan again. So if you are homeschooling, what feels most comfortable for you and your child? What do you think is going to provide the best learning experience for you both? Maybe you're more comfortable with a traditional model where it looks and feels a little bit more like school. It sort of follows the standards, it follows the ages and stages of normal development. In those models, you could be looking at traditional teaching. You could do an online platform. There's textbook options, literature-based teaching methodologies or options, or maybe you want to do a hybrid of some sort where you're doing a co-op for one class or a couple classes, you're doing online classes, etc. Or maybe you don't like traditional and you want to go with a thematic approach. Maybe you want to be more immersive in a topic or something of interest to your kids, or maybe experiential learning appeals more to you. Maybe you're sort of practical or trades interested. You have a niche like arts or music, something, maybe a nature school approach, or sort of what they call the unschoolers, right? Where they learn throughout the day, mostly child-led. So let's break that down even further. What is curriculum? Well, I think a lot of times when we think of curriculum, we think of a textbook, right? Okay, if I'm using curriculum, it must be Abeka, it must be PACES, it must be the something else, right? History Quest, curriculum. Well, not necessarily. Curriculum is actually just your plan for learning. So when the state says, I need your curriculum, you're going to tell them, okay, this is my plan for learning. And these are the resources and assessments that are supporting that plan. So in simplest terms, it's a description of the what, the why, and the how well students should learn in a systematic way. It's the means to fostering learning. And that could look like textbooks. It could look like exploratory work outdoors, or it could look like a cross of the both. So selecting an approach and curriculum that aligns to your purpose, your passion, and your plan is kind of your next step. Then you find the materials, the resources, and the assessments to support it. So breaking it down, if you're comfortable with a more traditional approach, maybe you want to be subjects-based or standards-based. Here's a few options for you. This looks and feels like a little bit more like school. You're following a specific course of learning, and generally the specific standards sort of broken down by ages and stages, right? And they generally have preset learning goals. So there's an online options out here. There's free online options like Khan Academy, Easy Peasy, Discovery K-12. Those are, I think these two, Khan and Discovery, are secular, whereas Easy Peasy is faith-based. Those are all free options. You would create an account, you'd log in, and the material is delivered to your child online. There's a few paid options. You might get a few perks for the paid options. Power Homeschool currently is $25 a month for up to 7 subjects, and all your reporting and everything is built into it. Okay. Same with study.com, Funcation, Time for Learning, and IXL. Those are all paid options for an online platform that basically, if your child's in 4th grade, you can choose which level to sign them up for. It's still your choice. But if they're in 4th grade working at level, you'd sign them up for all the 4th grade courses. And for you, poof, poof, done. Great option for you working parents out there who don't have a lot of time to spend. The system will do nearly all the work for you, and you can kind of just keep an eye on it, answer questions, and then in the end, write up those report cards and progress reports. A little bit more work for the parent would be a textbook option. Maybe your child does better with paper and pencil and real books, or you just want to keep them off of screens because maybe they enjoy screens for leisure time. Keeping them off screens is important to some people as well during the day. So you have open and go options. Basically, the entire curriculum has been written and it's all in one nice package for you. This can get costly, but there's a few lower cost options out there. But basically you would take that curriculum, you would open it up, and you would deliver the learning that is already in place in that model. Good and the Beautiful, Abeka, PACES, or the ACE system, those are all faith-based, but they're open and go. Okay. And then you just sort of supplement as you go along, but you can just sort of follow the scripts, follow the assignments and the textbooks that come with it. There's also subject-based learning. So maybe History Quest, that's probably appropriate for sort of multi-ages just a little bit, but it's going to be delivered just as a history curriculum. So you could choose that for history. You might do Saxon math or Singapore math. For math, you might have a different curriculum for language arts. You can piecemeal the ones you like the best. It does take some legwork though, trying to figure out which one works for you. Or there's a topics-based approach, something like Apologia. They have, that is also faith-based, but they basically have, say for science, it might be instead of Science 5 or Science 6 for grade levels, they're going to have something like anatomy and physiology. And this is a great option. But again, bring back to your purpose and your plan. If you are homeschooling and you're going to be doing this for a long time, that's a great approach. They are going to learn a lot in these topics. If you think your child's going to go back to school, though, keep in mind that if you're pulling them out for fourth graders are learning fourth grade content and all the standards that go along with it. And then fifth grade standards and content will be delivered in fifth grade. So if you choose a topics-based approach, you're missing a lot of the content that those peers are getting. So when you go back into that fifth grade classroom, the child may be at a disadvantage if you didn't learn what the other students learned. And again, it's all personal preference. It's not bad learning to learn by topics. In fact, it's very engaging and immersive. But if you need them to align to a certain set of standards, you may have better options at your fingertips. If I were to study engineering and I knew everything about engineering, it still means I learned a lot. But if the exam is on art, I'm going to look like I don't know what I'm doing, right? So again, align them to your purpose and your plan. Find that decision that best suits the outcome that you need. There's some literature-based curriculums. Basically, everything is learned through a selection of literature that will then support the standards or support the goals for learning. There's some big approaches out there like Charlotte Mason. You can look that up. It's very hands-on. They read literature and then all assignments are kind of driven into those books that they're reading. There's a few package curriculum out there. Guest Hollow is kind of a fun one. She provides this giant list of resources and books that you can delve into with some learning that goes along with those. Or of course, there's a hybrid approach, which is kind of like the happy hodgepodge, right? So you can choose a textbook for math, maybe an online resource, just YouTube for social studies or Khan Academy. Maybe you want to do an outschool class for art or cooking, asynchronous class for something else. You can make the day interesting just by varying the resources. There is no right or wrong, right? It's up to you. You're the principal now. You're the teacher. You get to decide. Just pick things that will foster learning for your child. All right, let's go ahead into DIY or eclectic approaches to your educational plan and your curriculum choices. So choosing your own educational format can be both enjoyable to the student and the parent because it definitely allows a lot more creativity, and you can sort of put your own spin on things in a way that suits your child's learning styles, right? So one way might be a standards-driven approach. The standards are there just so you can kind of know what students in that age bracket or grade bracket should be knowing at about that age, or just kind of what's the norm of that age group. So this is a great approach if you know they may be going back into a public setting, or maybe they're university bound and you just want to make sure they're kind of quote unquote on track, right? But you don't want to follow an open and go curriculum because that's a little too maybe restraining for you. And so what you can do is just go to the state websites, Common Core website has them, and you just look up the educational standards for your kids' age group. And then you take those standards and you build them into activities and learning experiences. So for instance, if you have a first grader who needs to understand sums up to 10, you might do a kinetic activity such as jumping. They could jump 2 times, and then they need to figure out how many more times do they need to jump to make the number 10. And you can do that in a variety of fashions with jumping or jumping jacks or sitting down, kicking a ball, whatever. You could be bouncing a ball a few times, or maybe you want to do a worksheet on that. You go to Teachers Pay Teachers, or you just create your own. Maybe you're going to make sums of 10 using blocks or other manipulatives. Those are all right ways to teach that standard, right? If your child's a little bit older, maybe they need to do a comprehension activity. So you can give them a short story, a poem, a book, a novel, whatever, and you can have them maybe do a sequencing activity. What came first, beginning, middle, end. You could have them describe that to you. You could have them do a pictograph. You could have them do a plot line on a chart. It's really up to you. It still accomplishes the same goal, right? And that could be your activity for the day. So it does allow for a little bit more creativity while still tracking along the same plot line as students of their age group in the public systems, okay? Another approach might be to work on a thematic or topics-based learning platform. So in this model, you would choose a topic of interest. Maybe it's underwater life, sea life, maybe it's medieval times, something like that. And then basically everything you do would fall under that category. And you can, again, you can do this on a standards-based approach, or you could do it on a subjects-based approach. So for instance, if you were doing underwater animals and you needed a science activity, maybe salinity or sink and float could be one of your science standards, then you would just relate it back to that sea life topic. And there are an abundance of resources on thematic units. You can even buy open and go thematic units on various topics, especially for the little guys. There's just tons of them out there where you could look up a unit for kindergartners on farms and poof, it's going to come up, and all the standards and all the objectives are going to be there built into this one common theme. So that's one way to do it as well. Or there's the experiential approach, in which those folks kind of believe that learning is acquired through meaningful experiences. It's definitely more hands-on, and that kids drive the learning, and it's mostly interest driven and probably a lot less standards based. So again, neither right nor wrong. Your state standards may guide that a little bit. They might want to have a bit more of a package that you're giving forth to them, or a little bit more of a formal plan that's written by you. But again, that's going to be up to you and your state. So that is basically all about that. And then the final plan is simply marking down the calendar. So are you going to be a school who runs year round? Are you going to be a traditional school year calendar, kind of following the public systems? I know personally, I live and die by that school year calendar. All of my calendar planners are even in the academic calendar, because I've been in academics so long. And so September 1st starts the new year, right? I like having my summers off, and I like the big breaks in between. Others find it a little bit more routine and consistency just to school year round. So it's really up to you how you want to do that. So once you kind of have your curriculum, your ideas in place, what I would do is, if you're going to do, say, a school year calendar, I would mark off that about that 40 weeks, making sure you get that 180 days of instruction if that's the rule. And then you take it from about mid-August to end of May, or whatever weeks and months you define. And then if it comes to 40 weeks, then I would subtract out all the weeks you want off. Might be the 2 weeks at the winter holidays, a week for Thanksgiving, a week at spring break. How many sick days do you need? Probably calculate at least 5 for those, just on either days where you're too tired, you need a mental health break, or maybe the kids are legitimately sick, right? Or you're legitimately sick. And then do you need any catch-up days? I like building catch-up days because it eliminates the stress of feeling like you're behind. There really shouldn't be a behind in the home learning environment, but sometimes we feel like we need to keep a certain pace on the curriculum. So build in days where there's literally nothing planned, so that if there are a few things you need to catch up on, that's the day you can do it. And then you want to consider holidays or celebration days, field trips, outings, play dates. That's all going to start being incorporated into your life, and that's really exciting. But you want to make sure you sort of block those days on the calendar, so that way when you take what's in your open and go curriculum, or your online curriculum, or just in your own plan up here, you're plotting it onto a calendar that's already accommodating those breaks. So now that we've covered the policies, you understand your purpose, and we've talked a little bit about the plan. It's time to go investigate your options. So the first thing I would do, go check on state laws, make sure you're in compliance, get that notice of intent submitted if you're ready to sort of take action now, and then withdraw them legally from your school. The last thing you want is to withdraw first and not have that plan in place and social services comes knocking at your door. It is the school's job right now to make sure your child is being protected. The state is there actually there to protect your child, right? And when you don't send them to school without notification, that can be a violation of that. So just make sure you're in compliance, you give them the right documents. Generally speaking, you withdraw them, and as a courtesy, I would definitely give that DOI, even if they don't require it, because then they can close out your file a little bit earlier, and they don't need to wait on the state so much to give them those documents, and you won't receive as many calls, right? Let's just get everybody on the same page. Then you decide on your approach. Everybody can de-school a little bit. Take some time, relax, find out their learning styles, find out how they want to learn. If you have high schoolers, if you have older students, ask them, have them add the buy-in to that. When we were looking at online options, I presented a couple choices to them because it's the child who's having to sit in front of that monitor for hours at a time, and they need to buy into the system. And so we looked at Power Homeschool, we looked at study.com, and while very similar in their applications, they were very different in the presentation. So for Power Homeschool, it's like looking at me on a screen. They're looking at the talking head, but they're seeing eyeballs kind of looking at them as well, right? And they preferred that, I think, to say a study.com model where it was more of a slideshow that was narrated. But other kids would really like that because it's a little bit more visual and they could probably take notes a little bit easier. So really let your kids look and see which one they can adapt to better so that the end result of learning is enhanced. All right, that would just be my take on that, and then just giving them the option to have some buy-in so they feel like they're part of this journey as well. You, the parent, do not have to plan out every single thing. Part of learning should be independence and building the ability to engage on your own, right? And that's exciting for kids. They get a little bit of control over this. They had very, very little control in public school. So being able to be offered that opportunity can be very enriching for them. And then once you sort of take time, you find your approach, then you execute your curriculum. And that can adapt and it can flex and it can change over time. It does not mean you have to find one way and stick with it for the next 12 years. Absolutely not. The amount of times we'll switch curriculums over time is probably quite frequent, actually. But evaluate and assess what's working, what's not. Is the curriculum not working because of one piece? Well, can you change it a little bit? Probably, and then make it work. So there's a lot of options there to think about. Feel free to drop any questions in the comments below, and I will try to get back to you if I can. And I will see you next time. Thank you again for watching. See you soon.